lamp unto my feet, and you're breathing life in me. That's who you are. You're the God of majesty, veiled in mystery, yet you're singing over me. That's who you are. My soul cries out to you. Let the waves of your glory crash all around me. My hope is found in you. As deep calls to deep, let heaven break through. You're the God of victory, authored all eternity, yet you're chasing after me. That's who you are. That's who you are. My soul cries out to you. Let the waves of your glory crash all around me. My hope is found in you. As deep calls to deep, let heaven break through. Oh, heaven break through. All around me, let heaven break through. Oh, heaven break through. All fear is broken, truth will undo the lies that were spoken when heaven breaks through. Joy overwhelming, old is made new. Death lays defeated when heaven breaks through. All fear is broken, the truth will undo the lies that were spoken when heaven breaks through. Joy overwhelming, old is made new. Death lays defeated when heaven breaks through. Oh, heaven break through. Round me, oh, heaven break through. Oh, heaven break through. My soul cries out to you. Let the waves of your glory crash all around me. My hope is found in you. As deep calls to deep, my soul cries out to you. Let the waves of your glory crash all around me. My hope is found in you. As deep calls to deep, let heaven break through. Oh, heaven break through. All
Hello and welcome. My name is Pastor Dave. Welcome to our new sermon series called Thunder in the Desert, repeating the proclamations of John the Baptizer. So John the Baptist is this character in the Gospels, and we're going to learn about him. We're going to look over the next month. We're going to look at 4 of the main things that he proclaimed, and we're going to find out what our response to those should be. So Thunder in the Desert is how the Message paraphrase of the Bible, how it paraphrases the term "a voice of one crying in the wilderness," which is a quote from the prophet Isaiah. And I get that if you are watching from Iowa, it doesn't feel like much of a desert around here. It's been pretty cold. But we're going to look at John the Baptist. Who was he? And this first part of the series, we are going to tackle his phrase of when he said, "Prepare the way for the Lord's coming, clear the road for him." What does he mean by that, and how can we respond to that? So let me read to you just kind of the basic description and mission of what John came to do. From Luke chapter 3, verses 3 through 6 says, "John, Zechariah's son, out in the desert at the time, received a message from God. He went all through the country around the Jordan River, preaching a baptism of life change leading to forgiveness of sins. As described in the words of Isaiah the prophet, thunder in the desert, prepare God's arrival, make the road smooth and straight. Every ditch will be filled in, every bump smoothed out, the detours straightened out, all of the ruts paved over. Everyone will be there to see the parade of God's salvation." So John is proclaiming to us that Jesus is coming. Jesus, and of course he is talking at a time when Jesus is about to become public in his ministry, and as we read it, like Jesus is coming back. So there's a lot for us to pull from John's proclamations. How are you preparing for his arrival? How are you preparing? Have you cleared the road for him in your life? So we're going to look at not just John today, but we're going to go back and look at John's parents, because I think that's a great place to start, and there's a lot to learn from that. So if you are familiar with the Bible, we have what we call the Gospels. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those 4 books are all accounts of the life and work of Jesus. And we have 4 different ones, and it's sort of like, I think of it a little bit like when there is a criminal trial, and if you're into criminal trials, the past couple of years have been good years for like court TV stuff, right? And in that trial, it's one trial, but they call a lot of witnesses, right? And the witnesses have a different perspective, a different expertise. Maybe they were eyewitness, maybe they were like a medical examiner. They collected the witness they collected the information, and their testimony was kind of formed after the event happened. But there's a lot of witnesses, but it's just one trial. And so we have the 4 Gospels that are all accounts of the life and ministry and work of Jesus, but it's one story. It's just different witnesses and a little bit different perspective based on who the witness is. And so when we look at the story of John the Baptist, we get a little bit different perspective and different snapshots of what he came to do and what he did and what his mission was. And so Matthew starts off, the Gospel of Matthew starts off with the genealogy and then a detailed account of Jesus' birth, and then it goes into an account of who John was and what he came to do, and of course then he baptizes Jesus and stuff. Mark starts with John the Baptist. So the Gospel of Mark just kicks itself off with an account of John the Baptist. Mark skips like the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus. Mark just skips all of that, goes right to John the Baptist. See, John the Baptist came to announce the coming of Jesus, not the coming as in the birth of Jesus, but the coming as in Jesus making his ministry and his life public. And so Mark just starts right with John the Baptist and skips the Christmas story. Luke weaves together this detailed account of the birth of John and of Jesus, because the story, John is a huge part of the coming of Jesus, and they are, we think, cousins. That the Bible tells us that they're relatives, and John is just a few months older than Jesus. When John's mom is pregnant with him, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is pregnant, and Mary goes and spends some months with Elizabeth, and the Bible tells us they're relatives, so we assume cousins of some sort. And so John and Jesus, they at least met in the womb. You can read about that, but it's presumed that they would have known each other growing up. Like if Mary went to visit Elizabeth while they were pregnant, it is assumed that at some point Mary would have visited with Elizabeth and Jesus, and John would have both been born. Like they would have spent some time together. I don't know how close they were. We do know from the reading of the Gospels that as adults they knew each other, and so Luke weaves together this detailed account of John and Jesus and their birth stories, and then goes into what John came to do before Jesus takes over. The Gospel of John starts with this prologue of Jesus. Like it doesn't really tell us the birth story. It starts with this prologue of Jesus, and then it weaves John's testimony into that. So John is this important player in the story of Jesus and announcing that Jesus is coming. He announces the arrival, and he comes to help people be ready for the arrival of Jesus. And so we're going to talk about how do we prepare for the arrival of Jesus, and not just like it. Of course, yes, the second coming, which is going to happen at some point, but also his arrival in your life this week, right? Like Jesus is showing up in our lives every week, and how are we preparing ourselves for that? How are we clearing the road for the arrival of Jesus in our life? So, Luke 1, 5 through 25, I'm going to read all 20 of these verses for you. This is the story of, part of the story of John's birth. So, when Herod was king of Judea, there was a Jewish priest named Zechariah. He was a member of the priestly order of Abijah, and his wife Elizabeth was also from the priestly line of Aaron. Zechariah and Elizabeth were righteous in God's eyes, careful to obey all the Lord's commandments and regulations. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to conceive, and they were both very old. One day, Zechariah was serving God in the temple, for his order was on duty that week. As was the custom of the priests, he was chosen by lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. While the incense was being burned, a great crowd stood outside praying. So John's father is a priest, and he's serving his, as they rotated around different duties amongst the priests, he's serving in this way with the burning of the incense. When Zechariah was in the temple, or in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. But the angel said, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you are to name him John. You will have great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. He must never touch wine or other alcoholic drinks. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. And he will turn many Israelites to the Lord their God. He will be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah. He will prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly." Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I be sure this will happen? I'm an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years." Then the angel said, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of the Lord, of God, and it is he who sent me to bring you this good news. But now, since you didn't believe what I said, you will be silent and unable to speak until the child is born, for my words will certainly be fulfilled at their proper time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah to come out of the sanctuary, wondering why he was taking so long. When he finally did come out, he couldn't speak to them. Then they realized from his gestures and his silence that he must have seen a vision in the sanctuary. When Zechariah's week of service in the temple was over, he returned home. Soon afterward, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and went into seclusion for 5 months. "How kind the Lord is," she exclaimed. "He has taken away my disgrace of having no children." And if you read further, you'll see that she goes full term, and her and Mary, the mother of Jesus, spend some time together, and ultimately John is born, and now we skip ahead to his adult life. But we're going to look at some of the things that we can learn from his father, from this interaction that Zechariah has with the angel. What's there? So this idea that John is driving is prepare the way for the Lord's coming, clear the road for him. So what do we need to clear the road of? What are the things in our life that are standing between us and the arrival of Jesus? What are the things that we need to clear the road of? I think the first thing that I see, especially in this story with John's father, is we need to clear the road of preconception. Clear the road of preconception. There is a lot of times when God is going to do something, and what stands between us and God is our preconceptions. See, Zechariah, he doubted the angel. Why? Because he had these preconceptions of what is possible, about what God is up to, about what God can or should do. See, John wasn't supposed to be born, right? His parents were too old for this sort of thing. They were well past their years of childbearing. That was a preconception that John's dad had. John, if you read the full story, John wasn't supposed to be named John. That wouldn't have been a family name. But he was named John because the angel said, "You're going to name this child John." But it's another area where we often have to clear the road of our preconceptions. Even John doesn't fit the mold. He heard from God, but he wasn't a religious leader. He sidestepped the temple. You realize that a lot of what was done around Judaism and the religious people, the temple was central to that. And the sacrificial system happened in the temple, and all this sort of stuff happened at the temple. And John, he just sidesteps it, and he goes out to the wilderness. He spends time along the Jordan River, and he favors the wilderness instead of the temple. What's going on? John is clearing the road of preconception. See, God isn't contained. God is not contained by what you think he should be up to, by what you think he should be doing, or by the way you think he should do it. And John is this character in his story is one where he is clearing the road of preconception. God does new things. God is up to new things. In my life, in your life, get rid of your preconceptions and approach God with an attitude of newness. God, you can do something new in my life. I understand and I know the history. I know that I've been disappointed here, or this has happened in the past, and things have not worked out, and all of that. But come to God with this idea that, you know what, God does new things. And my preconceptions of how it should be done or how it's been done in the past doesn't need to rule, because God does new things. Even John the Baptist, in his, he's called John the Baptist because he was baptizing people. And even the way he performed and did baptism was a new thing. Like, he wasn't a priest. He wasn't baptizing people. Like, often baptism in that time period was kind of this ritual thing that was done to cleanse a person if they had become unclean, because of disease or because they'd been in contact with a dead body, or different reasons why they were ceremonial unclean. And so baptism was a ritual cleansing. Baptism was also used for Gentiles, for non-Jews, when they wanted to convert to Judaism. They could be baptized into it. But John's kind of breaking the mold on those, and he's baptizing in a new fashion for a new reason. Because God does new things. The next area that I think we need to clear the road of is self-doubt. What is self-doubt? It can be defined as a state of uncertainty about the truth of anything. It could be about our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, opinions, decisions, self-views, or any truth. And so this when you look at the story, what was John's father's response to the angel's announcement? It was a response of doubt. How can this, will this be? Is this even possible? Like, it was a response of doubt. And Gabriel the angel, like, he forcefully says, I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of God, and it was him who sent me to tell you this good news. Like, Gabriel says, stop, man. Stop doubting. I came directly from God to announce this good news to you. Stop doubting. We need to clear the road of self-doubt. See, it's wintertime, and we've had some snow this winter, not a ton. We've had cold weather, but not a ton of snow. But one of the things, if you grow up in the Midwest, that you're familiar with, especially if you drive, is the sight of snowplows in the wintertime, right? And I remember, I'm from northern Minnesota, and we usually have more snow than we get here in Iowa. And seeing snowplows is just a regular part of winter. Like, you have the temperature drop, the snow, the snowmobilers, the ice fishing, and the snowplows. That's winter. I think there are times when our spirit needs a snowplow. When the things about us and our attitudes and our doubtfulness, it needs a snowplow. It needs to that stuff needs to be cleared out. See, we often are like John's father in that we look at who we are and our position and our capabilities and what we think we can accomplish. And we take all those things, and then we use those things to kind of tell ourselves what God may or may not do. I want to tell you, your capacity is not a roadblock to God's ability. Your capacity is not a roadblock to God's ability. Just because you are not capable of it does not mean God is not capable of it. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean God can't do it. Just because it seems impossible doesn't mean it's impossible. Right? John should, if we're just looking at the natural order of things, John should not have been born. His parents were too old. But he was born. Your capacity is not a roadblock to God's ability. See, it's time for us, as we prepare for Jesus' arrival, as we clear the road for him, it's time for us to get rid of the self-doubt, to quit approaching God with this idea that his ability is somehow affected by our capacity, by our ability. It's not. We have to approach God in faith. And faith is the transfer of control from our hands to God's hands. Faith is coming to God and saying, you know what? This thing, this situation, this circumstance, I got to give up control, and I'm going to give it to you, God. I'm going to let you be God in this area of my life. And we approach our life with a step of faith. It's how we prepare for Jesus' arrival. The last area I want to talk about is we need to clear the road of other people's expectations. Do you ever let other people's expectations influence you? That's probably a silly question, right? We do this all the time. I'm going to venture out and say I think we're all guilty at times of letting other people's expectations have too big of an influence in our life. And there are times so we often criticize politicians, right? Because they are bought by lobbyists or donors or whatever, fill in the blank. But we often criticize politicians because we feel like other people's expectations of them is what determines what they do. And this isn't the sermon about politics but that's often a criticism is they've been bought by their donors. They make this decision because this person donated a lot of money, so they got to listen to them. We're not so much different from politicians like that, except we're not getting paid money, but we're letting people's expectations of us dictate too much to us. And it's time for us to clear the road of other people's expectations. We've got to break through their barricades and ignore their detours. We've got to not allow other people to change our trajectory. We can't let other people's expectations diminish what God wants to do in our life. We can't let other people's expectations cause us to doubt what God is capable of. There is this king in 2 Chronicles, Rehoboam, and he is one of the sons of Solomon. So you have David and then Solomon, and then Solomon, his son Rehoboam, is king. And he takes over, becomes king when he's in his 40s. And so he's already an adult and grown up in some sense. But the couple chapters in 2 Chronicles that tell us about Rehoboam, it ultimately says that for a while, he followed the Lord and did right, but in the end, he was a wicked king. He didn't stick to it. And I've never been king. I don't know the pressure of being king. It seems like the pressure of being a king is in some ways similar to our politicians today, where the king has a lot of people trying to influence him, has a lot of important people and stuff trying to dictate what he should do. It's kind of like he lets other people's expectations have a lot of weight in his life. And ultimately, the section in 2 Chronicles, it tells us that he reigned for 17 years. So he didn't reign for a super long time. But it says that he did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. That ultimately, though he followed God for some time, he didn't prepare his heart to stick with it. And he became described as a wicked king. See, I think what happened with Rehoboam is he failed to clear the road. When John tells us, clear the road for Jesus' arrival, he's telling us, like, there are a lot of things in your life that are going to stand between you and Jesus. There's going to be these areas of your life that are going to be these barricades between you and Jesus. And it might be preconceptions. A barricade between you and Jesus is your preconceptions of how Jesus is going to arrive, what he's going to do, and those may all be wrong. So clear the road of that. Often one of the barricades, one of the things in the road between us and the arrival of Jesus is doubt. Right? We doubt ourselves, we doubt our position, we doubt that we have the worth that Jesus is going to show up in our life because we're not worthy. And John says, you've got to clear the road of that. And then another barricade in our life is often other people's expectations. We let other people have too big of a voice in our head. And John says, clear the road of that. And prepare for the arrival of Jesus. Get yourself into a position where your heart is prepared for his arrival. Don't be like Rehoboam, who ultimately he couldn't stick with it because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. So I want to close with just a simple question. How are you clearing your road for God's arrival? I touched on 3 things that might be in the road. Barricades, roadblocks between you and Jesus. There might be others. There probably is. How are you clearing the road for his arrival? If John the Baptist were to show up in Marshalltown this week, if he were to show up I think because he was in the wilderness and sometimes in the desert, I think if he showed up this week, he'd be cold. But if he were to show up, you know what his message would be? The same. Prepare for Jesus' arrival. Clear the road because he's on his way. How are you clearing your road this week?